At this time, we'll call to order the regular City Council meeting for February 12th, 2018. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call shows everyone present this evening. So we will move forward to the approval of minutes for January 18th, 2018. Councilmember Kennedy.
Okay, Lisa,
Yes.
on page 3, about halfway down through the second paragraph, the sentence ends with, do with anything. You see that? What needs to be inserted there is that Councilmember Parisian stated, quote, "She just said she could schedule around it," end quote.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The last paragraph, the third sentence down, it says profitably. The word should be profitability. On page 4, second sentence, it says to help them understand their wants and needs. It should say to help them separate their wants from their needs. The sentence after that says, further stated the subjective decision-making ability. That should be objective decision-making ability. And lastly, the about halfway down through that paragraph, it says companies personal. That should be personnel. So that's all I had for that.
I have a couple too.
Councilmember Kibble.
On page 2, the last sentence in there, it says opportunity to create a more substantive answer. It should have inserted than you might have if you're on the spot answering. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And on page 4, 3 lines down in the second paragraph at the end of that sentence, it says, do you see any concern in, and it should be inserted that, so it would actually say that you may blur the line. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have one as well.
Councilmember Parisian.
On page 7, at the very end of the last paragraph, the sentence begins, Councilmember Parisian further stated, this is not a race, this is an interview. The voters voted, it should say us instead of them, in to make the decisions. So that word just needs to be changed from them to us. Thank you.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Yes, I'm on page 2, and I am in paragraph 1, 2, 3, paragraph 4. And it starts, Councilmember Parisian asked Attorney Johnson, because the Open Meetings Act uses the word shall, her questioning went on, and she said, but if we are asking people to leave, and it is their choice, given that they have a right to be here, but if they choose to leave, is that a violation of the OMA? It's a very important distinction to make.
I move the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? approval of the minutes from January 20th, 2018.
I move the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Approval of the minutes from January 22nd, 2018.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Kennedy.
First, I'd like to commend the clerk for including Mr. Rich's apology verbatim in the packet. I thought that was beneficial, so nothing was lost in the transcription. Secondly, on page 14 of the minutes, last paragraph. Second sentence, it says process or questions of the interview. That really should be from last Thursday instead of the interview. And the beginning of the second sentence should probably be worded to, he stated, quote, and then the remainder of that sentence, so that we know that that's what the individual actually said. That's all I had.
I move the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Approval of the bills.
I'll move the bills.
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay. That includes the attorney invoices? Is that what you're including in the bills?
Are they normally included in the bills?
They're
They
a bill.
normally are.
Motion passes. Approval of the agenda.
Mayor,
Mr. Willem.
as a follow-up to my letter to council, I would ask that in addition to the agenda, after section 5, council comment be added for a closed session pursuant to section 8H of the Open Meetings Act to consider and discuss written attorney-client privilege communication, which is exempt from disclosure under section 3(1)G of the Freedom of Information Act relating to records subject to attorney-client privilege, and this is all relating to legal matters raised in the letter submitted to my office in connection with the January 18, 2018 special council meeting.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
I had two issues on that. I thought that the letter that Ms. Cloesy forwarded to City Council has become public. So why would you need to go into a closed meeting? That would be my first argument. The second one is there's no litigation, and the Open Meetings Act clearly requires litigation. I understand the provision you're going under. That's the second argument. The third argument is the one that I raised in my email to you, is I felt that Johnson Rosati had a conflict of interest in any further continuation on this matter, given that it was Mr. Johnson that was here the night of the incident. And if anything does happen with City Council regarding litigation, I think it would only be a likely continuation of that litigation to whether or not it survives, but it's clearly an action that the city would have against Johnson Rosati for malpractice, plead you in as a third-party defendant. So I think it's difficult for me to go into a closed meeting and listen to whatever advice you may want to give when, in the back of my mind, I'm sitting here wondering, are you really protecting me or are you protecting your law firm? So I'm going to assert conflict of interest.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Will,
if I could respond to the Councilmember Kurzweil's comments. The letter itself, it's my understanding, I have some information, but I've not seen whether the letter from the attorney, not being my office, has been made public. But if it is, that doesn't make any difference. I've written the council an attorney-client privilege communication, which would provide a basis on which to go into closed session and discuss that issue. There is no requirement under that provision of the OMA that there be active litigation. And with respect to the conflict of interest, I disagree. I don't think there's a conflict of interest. Our firm is capable of providing objective legal advice to the council. However, if council wants to entertain that notion, go ahead.
I'm not going to waive any conflict of interest, so thank you.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended.
Mr. Mayor,
Chief.
if I could, I would like to remove new business item number 1, and I will reinsert it on the agenda for February 26th.
Okay.
That's due to a potential legal issue that has arisen regarding the appointee for that position.
Thank you.
226, you said? Is that the?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Are we checking this or that?
No, it's the closed session.
I'm a little confused, I guess. I thought we were doing that.
Ask for a recount, please.
I'll ask for just a roll call.
Can I just have clarification on what we are voting on right now? Are we voting on chief's removal, or are we voting on both, or the closed session, or one
Start with the closed
separately?
session first.
So we will go with the closed
Deleting
session.
new business 1 and adding,
And adding a closed session.
Yeah.
We'll split them up.
Walton?
What are you doing the
Time.
call on? What's on the table?
Time out. Everyone just take a deep breath. Is this about closed session or chief taking number 1 off
Well, the way,
business?
Mr.
Oh.
Mayor, if I may,
Mr. Will
the motion was made before Chief
spoke.
spoke.
Okay.
So you have a motion on the table, and it was voted on. That would be the motion to add the closed session to the bottom of the agenda.
Okay. Now, that would have nothing to do with removing item number 1 off new business.
It appears that there's some concern about the vote on that particular motion. Why don't we I would suggest council address that motion, make clear the motion and what the vote is, and then you can move on to a motion to amend the agenda or approve the agenda with the removal of item number 1.
Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Kennedy.
Just a point of information, if the motion's already been raised, already seconded, already been voted upon, are we taking a roll call just as it was already taken?
Yes.
Or are you opening it
That's-
back up
That's my
for
understanding.
further discussion and another vote?
It's my understanding there was an attempt to call a roll call to verify the vote on the motion on the floor, which was to approve the agenda to add the closed session, which was the only change to the agenda made at that time.
And that was
That-
seconded and approved.
That was the mayor's call, that the motion had passed.
So do we want to amend that?
Just do a roll call.
Lisa, please. Thank you.
Walton? No. Richards?
No.
Kurzweil?
No.
Parisian?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Elchat?
Yes.
Doesn't pass.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Mr. Will?
under the resolution setting council, procedures for council deliberation, which is dated January 23, 2006, item number 3, an item may be added to the current agenda upon approval of a simple majority of council members under the following conditions. The relevant provision under there is item C, all other items upon approval of a supermajority of 5 of the council members. Motion failed.
All right, let's go on.
Do we need to address Chief Collins asking for new business number 1 to be rescheduled for the second meeting in February? Do we have a motion on that?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Moving on. Introduction of Utility and Public Works Superintendent.
Oh, that would briefly be me. Today is the first day on the job for our new Utility and Public Works Superintendent, Mike Boven. Give you just a little bit of background, then I'll let him fend for himself. Mike received his MBA from Aspen University and his undergrad degree from Olivet Nazarene University. He holds a Class A wastewater license. You're only required to have a B to operate our wastewater plant. He also holds water licenses S1, D1, and F3 for water. His last position was as East Michigan area manager with responsibilities for 37 different wastewater projects. And with that, I'll ask Mike to say a few words.
I guess, first of all, do you have any questions for me, if anything?
Are you concerned about being bored with simply one place to tend to?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm thankful for it.
Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I
Welcome to the
agree, I
team.
agree, yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
have some of the best workers in both DPW and the water department. This is a very, very dedicated crew of individuals that are hardworking, and I'm sure they're just waiting to meet you and move forward with new leadership. So
Yeah, I've met just about everybody today, so we'll finish in meeting everybody tomorrow, and we'll go from there. And I have a lot of goals and a lot of plans that I set forth for myself, and hopefully for the city as well. And hopefully we can attain a lot of those goals. So.
I'd have 2 things to add. Mike got a very early start. He's already been up to the coffee hour at Colonial Acres this morning. Met a number of our seniors. And the other thing is the top priority as assigned by the interim manager is getting all the remaining outstanding budgets or budget requests submitted to the manager's office.
Fantastic.
may I just ask you a quick question on budgeting?
That's all right.
Tends to sort of be my thing. How much budgeting background do you have? I mean, budgeting for this?
I was responsible for about $1.7 million worth of projects for infrastructure alternatives. That varied between cities, private places. So there was a lot of budgeting. There was budgeting done on the corporate side, and I was responsible for the profits and losses there. And then also we would sit down with the communities and do capital budgets, do their budgets for them. And then also we incorporated some of that into our projects because we took care of, it was an all-inclusive contract. So we set our own budgets for that project as well. So yeah, very extensive. I told Lloyd that, I've got a lot of experience with the BSNA software that you guys use here. So it's,
Really?
yeah. So I've done that work for the city of Howell, work for the city of Cadillac, and then a lot of the smaller communities, Leslie and some other ones, use the BSNA software as well that I've worked at.
Okay, thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have anything? Thank you again. Welcome to the team. At this point, we'll move on to public comment. I would like to gently remind everyone to please state your name and address before starting.
Hi, my name is Joyce Closey, 954 Oxford.
I just wanted to read the letter for everyone that the city attorney is referring to, and they're referring to going into closed session about, because it's certainly not a private letter, so I just want to read it on the record. This letter was sent on February 6th, 2018 to Christopher Johnson at Johnson & Rosati via mail and via email. The letter states, Dear Mr. Johnson, I write in my capacity as retained counsel for Joyce Cloacy, who was recently one of 4 candidates for an appointed open position on the South Lyon City Council. I understand that you were present and serving as legal counsel for the city when on January 18th, 2018, Ms. Cloacy and 3 other candidates for city council were interviewed in a public meeting. As you know, Ms. Cloacy was during her interview asked by City Council member Carl Richards whether she had recently had a baby, openly suggesting that her status as a mother of young children might conflict with her availability to serve on council. Ms. Cloacy answered the question but went on to note that she had previously indicated that as a stay-at-home mother who works part-time, she had no issues with availability, and she failed to see how her status as a mother was relevant to her ability to serve on council. She later noted that while the council asked about her children, no questions were asked about the degree she held, certainly more appropriate aspects of her qualifications to serve on city council. Following this discussion, the council voted 4-2 to appoint Stephen Kennedy to the council, one of 2 men who had applied for the position. Notably, while Ms. Cloacy had actually run for a seat on the city council in the general election last November and was next highest vote getter in the election, Mr. Kennedy had not even entered the race as a candidate. Given the vote breakdown and the comments of the other council members during open session, it is clear that, but for Mr. Richards' discriminatory views about women and the appropriateness of mothers of young children serving on city council, my client would have at minimum received 3 votes from the city council. Presumably that would have necessitated some sort of runoff process. Given a process not infected by Mr. Richards' discriminatory comments and viewpoints, and given my client's status as the next highest vote getter in the general election, it is clear that but for sex discrimination, Ms. Cloacy would have and should have been selected for the open city council seat. That Mr. Richards felt so comfortable asking clearly inappropriate questions of my client in a public setting during an interview for a paid position with the city is troubling beyond the implications for my client. Indeed, his comments suggest a deep lack of understanding of the law on the part of some of South Lyon's elected officials. The fact that no one on council called out Mr. Richards in the moment for his comment, the mayor only laughed when the question was asked, the fact that a voting process then immediately took place without any consideration of whether Mr. Richards' comments could infect the process, and the fact that the city council as a body had not sufficiently demonstrated that it understands the appropriateness of its actions indicate that the city needs, at minimum, serious training and advice on legal compliance issues. My client is a long-standing citizen of South Lyon. She owns multiple properties in the community. She and her husband are raising children in South Lyon, and she has volunteered her time and stepped up to be considered for a public role to try to make a difference in her community. The actions of the council in focusing on her status as a mother and then selecting a male candidate who did not even put his hat in the ring during the electoral process are insulting and discouraging to all women living in the South Lyon community, and certain to any woman who desires to take a leadership role in the city. Moreover, it is indicative from the widespread press attention that the majority of city council's actions have garnered, that this incident has put South Lyon in a very negative light nationally. To ensure the city takes these issues seriously, my client has decided to file a complaint based on sex and family status discrimination with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Moreover, she would like the city council as a whole to publicly apologize to her and to the community at large at the next public meeting, not only for the actions of Councilmember Richards, but for the failure of the others on council to appropriately address the incident. Finally, we are asking for the council to undergo discrimination training so that council members are educated about the law in this area and the potential liability that the council creates for the city when it acts and speaks in a discriminatory manner. Please convey my client's request to the city council and let me know prior to the next public meeting whether council will honor them. No response was received. To attempt to compartmentalize the blame away to Carl is an attempt to trivialize a much larger problem with the majority of the nature of council.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. My name is Charles Duty. My address is 40 Hillcrest Road, Northville, Michigan. I am a township resident and a former city resident. It's ironic that 50 years ago today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was demanding economic and human rights for all Americans with diverse backgrounds. I stand before you as someone who has suffered at the hands of discrimination and mistreatment. I stand before you as someone who has stood long and hard in the fight for equal treatment of all individuals. And it's very strange to me that I stand before your City Council this evening to address two very important issues involving human rights. City Council, interim manager, city attorney, with regards to the discriminatory, dehumanizing questions asked of Joyce Closey, Mr. Richards, and members of this council, time is up. The time is now. You must own this sad error. You must develop and put in place a plan that assures that nobody will ever again suffer at the hands of public servants. You have to say and mean that you're sorry. You have to have diverse training, and you have to make sure that this does not repeat itself. Council members must refrain from personal attacks on citizens. Surely you realize that the citizens are your employer. You're not doing them a favor. You were elected to serve all, and you should. A reminder came to me of the lawyer's oath here in the state of Michigan. The last stanza of that oath, and many of the attorneys in the room know that it's correct, is I quote, I will, in all other respects, conduct myself personally and professionally in conformity with the high standards of conduct imposed on members of the bar as conditions for the privilege to practice law in this state. End of quote. On my other subject, which is number 3 under old business on the current agenda this evening, I would strongly like to remind the council that part of what you should do is have an open mind and listening ears to any and all comments and concerns that come before you. Refrain from calling residents names like liar. Refrain from any and all attempts to silence anyone. No one deserves to be silenced. This should be an open democracy. I remember some of your faces during your campaigns. I remember what you said. I remember that you said that this would be a transparent city and that there should be nothing to hide from. And again, attempt to silence anyone is wrong. In closing, let me leave you with a final thought from Helen Keller. Many persons have a wrong idea about what constitutes true happiness. It is not attained through self-gratification, but through fidelity to a worthy purpose. Thank you so much for your time and have a great evening.
Thank you for your comments.
Ryan Lair, 716 Grand Court. I'm here tonight to, on behalf of Rose and Joyce. I've been also a long-standing member of this community, and I love South Lyon. I love everything about this town, and we have a lot of church-going families and women, hardworking women in this town. And the questions that were asked were inappropriate, including nobody has mentioned the disgusting comments that were made by Councilwoman Parisian regarding intended inappropriate relationships between a council member on council and a person in the audience. Now, I understand that some other people have perceived it different ways. Some people have interpreted it a different way. The point is nobody on council has to disclose who their friendships are. It's not important. It does not mean anything what it has to do with the operation of the city. What does paying a bill for the water department have to do with the friendship on council? What, because your friend may not want a backhoe, or your friend may not want this? If you're friends with somebody on council, John Galius was friends with Glenn and Harvey, and that didn't make any difference. Dan was his best friends with William Powell, and he ran. Nobody asked the men any of those questions, only the women. And you continually called Joyce a liar when she came up here the second time and defended herself and said that's the way she interpreted it. It doesn't matter how you interpret it. She was hurt and totally embarrassed by the questions that you asked her. So tonight, I'm asking you to apologize to the entire city and Joyce for your comments. There is no right or wrong. She answered it the way she felt it was, and to get mad at Rose when she didn't disclose that she was friends with Joyce, she doesn't owe you an explanation. She owes you nothing. She is just another member on this council. She's allowed to have friends whoever she wants to have friends with, whether you like it or not. That's just the way it is. But anyway, I would like to ask for your apology. I would like you to apologize to the citizens tonight at this meeting, because you called her a liar at least 3 times. And I haven't seen any proof that you have or that you can show that these 2 people were actually lying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm not as tall as everybody. My name is Julia Pulver. My address is 6710 Buckland Avenue in West Bloomfield, Michigan. I'm also running for state senate, which would include representing South Lyon. And so I wanted to be here tonight to show my support for Joyce. I also am a mother. I have 4 kids, so I have twice as many kids as Joyce does. And I think if I can handle it running for state senate for a very much larger seat, somebody running for a part-time city council position with 2 children should have no problem meeting those responsibilities. I think this is, sad that we have to be here, and I really hope that you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Julie Paquette. I'm a resident of Lyon Township, 56888 9 Mile. And I just wanted to show up tonight to state my feelings on the questions that were posed to Ms. Closey, and the fact that I feel that they were, obviously the question about her motherhood was just inappropriate and irrelevant. And it was a waste of time, a waste of an opportunity. Instead of asking about this woman's actual qualifications, to ask her about whether or not she had had a child. Additionally, the reaction during the questioning, the question itself did not just show a lack of training. It showed a lack of judgment. And Mr. Mayor, your reaction during the exchange of laughing, again, that just really showed a lack of judgment, and I also feel a lack of leadership. And I don't think it really needs to be said, but as a woman, as a business owner, a successful business owner, and a mother, the fact that someone today is being asked that question as a follow-up to her answer that she is capable, she is available, and she is willing to do the job, to me is just absolutely appalling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Torres. I'm at 763 Norchester Street, just up the street from the mayor. I'm here today in support of Joyce as well. I did not grow up in South Lyon or in Michigan, and it is rare that I get to share news about this area with family and friends out of town. And it is very disappointing that on the occasion of a news article actually hitting my social media feed, this is one of the ones that, grabs the most attention. And people ask me, hey, isn't this the town you live in? It's incredibly disappointing. But rather than going over all of the facts, I think, that have been established and were recorded, we talk to kids a lot about teachable moments and about standing up for other people and doing the right thing when it doesn't necessarily seem popular or easy. And I think council has the opportunity to lead by example by accepting responsibility for not conducting themselves professionally and in a manner that's befitting to anyone in leadership, and to really reflect on the requests right now to have additional training about discrimination and law, that's not a punishment or a way to rake people over the coals, but it's an opportunity for improvement. And it's a way for us to move forward without having this have the kind of tarnish on the city and the people of South Lyon that it currently has. So I'd ask you to really entertain that and to be sincere in your actions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Salvatore, and I live at 304 East Lake Street in South Lyon. And I just wanted to introduce myself to the council. I'm Joyce's attorney. I'm a civil rights attorney with offices in Northville and in Chicago. And like the last speaker, I specialize in women's rights and gender equity work, and I live here in South Lyon. I have for 14 years. I'm raising kids here and working full-time and running a business as well. And so I, too, when I got the news from a friend in Pittsburgh, actually, who'd seen it on her Twitter feed about what happened at the meeting, I was really disappointed and dismayed, and have told Joyce that I'm happy to serve as her pro bono counsel in this matter. Really, her goal is to just have some education of this of both City Council as a whole. Some members of City Council, I think, get it, but this is the kind of issue that gets litigated. It could be litigated in federal court as a constitutional violation under Section 1983, the Equal Protection Clause, which we bring those cases. We chose instead, Joyce chose to file a complaint with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. The issue really is helping the council and the community understand that this is wrong and that it's something that needs to be addressed. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I hope we do get a response to the letter. We asked for a response prior to the meeting. I hope we do get a response and that this issue is taken seriously and is learned from, so that there isn't further liability that the city subjects itself to, and so that women in this community feel comfortable stepping up into a leadership role, so that our daughters feel comfortable taking on leadership roles and feeling like they live in a city where their mothers are valued as equally as their fathers. So thank you for listening today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if we have nothing else, we will move on to old business number 1, discussion of the downtown.
Well, you have the report in your packet from Chief Collins. Just I want to highlight a couple items. The DDA board retreat, our second annual board retreat, will be February 15th. And the list of accomplishments, which I set on your desk tonight, is one of the first items on our agenda. So we will review that list, and then we'll go on to spend the majority of our meeting planning for 2018. The building improvements downtown, it's an exciting time. The Planning Commission approved the design for 115 and 117 last Thursday night. So those two buildings are coming into our building department for the permits. The contractor has already started on 123, 125, and 127 with the window replacements on East Lake Street. Those are the addresses of East Lake Street. That's basically the building with the Lake Street Tavern and the Taekwondo. So all of those awnings that you see there will be removed as well as the first floor awning on the Taekwondo, and all the windows will be replaced. New cornice, matching the old, and new paint. So that's exciting. I think people start to really believe that change is here when they see physical improvements, even more than a new retail business. We've taken our first steps for the list of buildings that need maintenance improvements. Those have been addressed at the last two council meetings. The first step, really, in meeting with city attorney, interim city manager, zoning administrator, and our building department, was to meet face-to-face with each of the owners. Kind of set the clock, start moving forward by meeting face-to-face. And we will start with, actually with 110 Detroit Street this week. And we'll follow that process and hopefully have accomplishment of some movement.
Bob, can I cut you off for just a second? Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, may I? So I'm just curious, can you keep us posted after you speak with them instead of having to come back to council 2 weeks later? So as soon as you speak with the owner of
Sure.
110 Detroit, can you
No
keep
problem.
council abreast of, let us know?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. The other thing is that, again, not only are we look back at the board retreat at the accomplishments of 2017, but we're excited to where we're going. And so 2018 is really shaping up to be a great year. And we're going to be looking at a program which I've discussed with a couple members of council to recognize successful, creative local business owners each month. We will have, again, those rehabs that I just noted. We will witness the first banners across North Lafayette Street this spring for events because the banner poles are in. The Bonner buildings will be for sale, although talk is cheap, but we were told that they'll be for sale by the end of February. So let's not get too excited, but we'll look for the signs. Farmers market improvements are coming this year. There'll be some exciting new retail, which I can't mention yet. We're going to be doing a lot more promotions and marketing. And our hardworking DDA is opening up the committees for the Main Street program to get more community involvement. That's it.
That's great.
Is the inaugural banner going to come back with a splash? Is it going to be a big deal? Or is it just going to be informational?
I think the first banner will be the first event. I think it's going to be Ladies' Night Out. The DDA has to go through the details of having a second Ladies' Night Out in May. And then I have to work with the new fire chief because I haven't conveyed to the new fire chief what the former fire chief's plans were to put the hardware up and raise the banner. So I need to talk with the new fire chief. So we have between now and May to work out a system.
A little forced account work there.
So no, it's
I hope it's something that's really spectacular. So so everybody understands the value of that in particular.
Yes. And those banners, we're working on a policy, and so that there's some guidelines for the banners. And so we'll have that. It'll be a great year.
Got a question.
Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, Bob. When the Bonner buildings become available, okay, for sale, and title transfer has taken place at the county level and such, is there any chance the city might be interested in buying 113?
I don't think so.
Because Cultural Arts talked about it some time ago, okay, for a display area for artworks and such. It was discussed in Cultural Arts. And I'm just saying, would the city be interested in buying it, you think?
My personal opinion is that I think the private sector needs to buy those buildings as soon as possible. Because the sale is one thing. Just a ballpark figure is that the 111 North Lafayette, the Artcraft building you're speaking of, is going to need at least $250,000 worth of improvements at a minimum. And I don't think our city budget can afford that, or the Cultural Arts. And then the other building is going to take a lot more money.
Okay, well, how can the city enforce, just a new owner comes in and says he buys it, okay, takes over ownership, title transfer and everything. How can you enforce that he's going to spend that much money? Well, if he just wants to do a cosmetic touch-up, okay, on the outside of the building, and the window dressings and such and so forth. I'm talking about art craft building pretty much, you know.
Well, I think my job will be to work with the new owner, and certainly we won't lay off enforcing any ordinances. And so it's the same game plan. The owner will change, which presents an opportunity, but the game plan is to get the building renovated, to follow the ordinances, and get a tenant, get a quality tenant. On the private investors' back, not on the city.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Good work, Bob. Thanks. You've been busy.
Thank you.
Moving on to old business number 2, proposed restrictive covenant for 128 South Lafayette. Suggested motion is to table this, the Arcadius request for approval of the restrictive covenant. I don't believe the paperwork's ready. Councilmember Kurtzwell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick question for the city attorney. Did we get the letter of assurance?
We didn't get exactly what I expected to get. So they provided an environmental indemnity agreement, which is different than the assurance letter that had been presented to us earlier, which is really part of the nature of why this isn't ready. There's some things in there that I need additional time with both Arcadis and the city's consultant, ASTI, to go through and make sure that the concepts and the procedure, there's some additional procedures that BP Amico is asking for. I want the opportunity to deal with our consultant and find out what impact, if any, that has, and come back with a recommendation and decide whether we try and revise the document in advance of bringing it to council. We can do that.
Because I'm a little bit concerned about approving the covenant deed without having the assurance letter wrapped up. I mean, I don't want to do that.
It would all be a package.
It'd be a package, okay. All right, thank you.
Does anyone else have anything? Moving on to number 3 on old business, consider additional public comment.
We didn't do a motion.
Was there a motion?
Excuse me?
We didn't do a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion to table the Arcadis request for approval of the restrictive covenant.
Okay. Wait, excuse me. If you're going to put this off, the correct motion is the motion to postpone. Motion to table is only if you're going to table it in the same meeting. So your motion needs to be a motion to postpone.
With the date?
With the date.
Tim, do you have a rough estimate or whatever you're comfortable with for a date on that?
I don't. Arcadis has indicated they're willing to meet with us and go through this, but I have to figure out.
Do we think a month would be enough? 2 months?
I would do longer than that.
Okay.
If it's ready earlier than that, I can always
bring
it to
okay.
The city manager's attention.
So we're changing the language then of our motion that's on here?
Let's do the first meeting in June.
June 11th, okay. So then I'm going to amend my motion, and that's going to be a motion to postpone the Arcadis request for approval of the restrictive covenant to the first meeting in June, which is the 11th, 2018.
I'll support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Sorry about that. Now on to old business number 3. Consider additional public comment and public comment procedures at city council meetings.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Parisian.
Chief, I appreciate all of the work you did looking into this. I'm sure, Tim, you probably did a lot of work too. What what specific communities did you look at?
Actually, this work came from the city attorney.
Thanks, Chief. Way to be honest.
Provided the copies of the.
I just have the agenda note. That's it.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask, did the council members receive the background documents that are samples of other communities' council rules and procedures? Would have been separate outside of the packet.
then maybe we did not.
Either way, I'm satisfied as long as you can just shoot off which communities you looked at as a reference.
Yeah, the intent was to provide those outside of the packet because they're so voluminous, so that you had a chance to look at them. Without having had the opportunity to do that, I would recommend that the matter be postponed.
Okay.
Do you think you can have those for the next meeting?
Certainly.
Okay. I move that we postpone to the February 26th meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Right, that's all we have.
New business number 2. Traffic Control Order 18-01. Chief, I'm going to allow you to speak to this if you don't mind.
Hopefully that's an easy one. In my capacity as police chief and traffic engineer for the city, actually it was a council person brought this to my attention that on McMunn, where the rail trail crosses just south of the tube mill, when trucks are backing in and out, there's a potentially hazardous situation. There are appropriate crosswalk signs for the tube mill itself and appropriate crosswalk advance signs some distance both north and south of the tube mill crosswalk. So all that would be required to improve the situation and improve safety would be to have the DPW install the designated crosswalk sign right at the rail trail and to paint the appropriate pavement markings. That's what Traffic Controller 1801 does, and I'm requesting council's approval to put that into motion.
Seems like a layup. Do we have any discussion on this?
I'd like to make the motion to approve for the signs and the lines to be as appropriate for Traffic Controller 1801.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. New business number 3, direction to bookkeeper regarding vacation time bank.
I think the beginning of that one can be mine also. It involves vacation time banks and a change that was made to the personnel manual. The short story is that in the interim between the time that this was first worked on and the time that the resolution was actually approved, I accrued an additional 200 hours of vacation time, which I believe at least should be included in the frozen bank so that I'm not forced on very short notice to use an additional 200 hours of vacation time before this August 4th, which is my anniversary date. My anniversary date was August 4th, and the resolution amending the city personnel manual was not approved until September. So there should have been some changes made before council actually approved the resolution on September 11th. And I'm just asking for direction to the city bookkeeper to clarify that it should be 651 hours, not 451 hours that is known as frozen time.
Thanks, Chief. Councilmember Kurtzwell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I have the facts straight. So as of August 1st, you had already accumulated the additional 20 hours.
Not as of August 1st. As of August 1st, I had 451 hours.
Okay.
On August 4th, I accrued an additional 200 hours.
Okay, so those hours were already accrued.
Yes.
Vacation policy changes on September 11th.
That's when the resolution was passed, changing the personnel manual. The problem was nobody went back and changed the date of the effective date in the personnel manual of August 1st, 2017. So in fact, it's an ex post facto issue where council passed a resolution on September 11th, changing the personnel manual effective August 1st.
Well, if that's the case, then we would have to go back and amend the resolution.
That would be entirely up to city council and the city attorney.
How many other employees are affected by this?
0.
You're the only one?
I am.
I can see why she did what she did. Because of that August 1st. Well, as I recall, I do believe that we are providing the unions until March of 2018 to state what their vacation is too. Is that correct?
I'd have to check contracts on that. I don't recall.
I thought we gave everybody until December 31st.
I do recall you mentioning December 31st, but I didn't see that date in writing.
I thought I said December 31st.
Mr. Mayor.
Tim, if you got feedback, please.
I couldn't find any reference to the December 1, but I seem to remember that date coming up during the discussion. But to Chief's point, the earliest this resolution took effect was September 11th. The August 1st reference in the resolution was an oversight that was missed because it was brought in the end of July in the anticipation of making it effective as early as possible at a convenient date. It was not approved at that point. It came back in September, and that's why there's the discrepancy between the dates. And it was just an oversight to go back and catch the August 1st date in the resolution.
I'm a little bit fuzzy on exactly the time sequence. So we had actually come to the conclusion this is the direction we wanted to go into in July, you say?
It was presented at the second meeting in July.
Okay, because there's actually none of the documents, and I couldn't find it through my packets at home, so they don't make any reference in our packet document here when that discussion had been conducted. So was the expectation at that time that we would be able to turn this around to be able to fulfill the August 1st date?
I'm not sure I followed the question.
When we had made the decision that this was the direction we wanted to go in, and we just needed to attend to some language in the personnel manual and things of that nature, was the objective to try to fulfill that by the August 1st date?
I think when it was originally presented at the second meeting in July, the intent was to make this policy effective not upon that adoption date, but at a next convenient date, like the start of the month, August 1st. When it was not adopted in that second meeting in July, going back and dealing with and changing that effective date was missed.
Okay, the reason for my question is, was our intent for this to end up being done as, post haste, and our city manager has been missing an awful lot of the time. Was this a product of this not being attended to in a timely manner with her absence? I don't recall what the circumstances were.
I think this was, if I recall, there was quite a bit of push from the council level to deal with reducing the number of days that could carry over.
Correct.
We created this frozen bank. Then we got into the issue, we were going to deal just with the department heads. Then it was expanded to all employees, and it took a period of time to get this all arranged and drafted the way we wanted it. And
in one comprehensive
I don't
document.
think it was due to any absences or anything of that nature.
Okay.
It was simply language tweaking and council getting comfortable with the concept and getting the language to reflect what council truly wanted. That was the reason for the delay, in my understanding.
Well, I mean, this is certainly no fault of the chiefs that the timing of this, so I'm afraid the way I'm seeing it is we're going to have to eat this one, so.
I got to jump in and I got to back you on this. We're going to handcuff Chief because he stepped up and we have an operating city manager now, and now he's got to blow through 200 hours before August. Do we want him to do that this week? I know I don't. So, I mean, that's your options. That's where I'm at with it. So, is it ideal? Probably not, based on what you were trying to do. But pick your poison, I guess.
Can I ask something?
Councilperson Kurtzwell.
Oh.
Okay. Councilman Richards, go ahead.
Chief Collins, if I know you're extremely dedicated, okay. If we can't come to a sizable or a suitable agreement on this, what's fair to all parties, would you just be willing to take a payout on the 200 hours, or do you want the time off? Okay, because some men never take vacations very well through their whole working career. They're workaholics, okay? And in your case, I think you're dedicated because we've called upon you, okay? Because we're in a crisis situation. But if we can't reach a suitable agreement, would you just take a payout on the difference? Go ahead.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Yes, I've been working on this because I'm a workaholic myself, and I work probably about 14, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I remember spending a lot of time on this issue. I think, in my mind, is that the vacation time accrued prior to the adoption of the resolution. So I think I am inclined to go ahead and include the additional $200. I think 200 hours. I think if your accumulation came after the resolution, it would be a different story.
If that were the case, I wouldn't be asking for the
That's what I
clarification.
thought. So I'm going to move to direct the bookkeeper to enter 651 hours as frozen in, I don't know if I like this motion, now that I'm reading it. I would like to direct, I move to direct the city bookkeeper to enter an additional 200 hours accrued by Chief Collins on or before August 4th and prior to council's adoption of the resolution amending the City of South Lyon Personnel Manual to limit the accumulation of annual leave by city employees and clarify provisions relating to payment of the same, to ensure that Chief Collins' total accrued hours as frozen, effective tonight, or February 13th, or whatever tonight is, effective tonight, total 651 hours. I think that's a little bit clearer. He accrued the hours prior to, so that's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank
All
you,
opposed?
Council.
Motion passes.
Passed.
New business item number 4, DDA and Economic Development Director salary.
I think this one, oh, go ahead.
No, go, Chief.
No, go
All
ahead.
right. Possible courses of action, authorize, do not authorize an increase in salary. Recommendation, raise the rate of pay of Director Donahue to the top of salary range, $69,564, effective February 14th, 2018. The increase is recommended due to personal observations of the interim manager with respect to Director Donahue's job performance, as well as positive recommendations from the business community. Do we have a council?
I would just like to add to that as well, and part of recommendation as council as well, we sing your praises often. We see what you do in the community and the impact that you have ever since you were hired to today's date. You've done quite a bit of work. So I am in favor of this simply because our downtown is flourishing, and I do attribute it to you. You do a lot of work downtown. You're constantly working. You just provided us with a long list of things that are going on, that are happening, that have been done, and that's just for today, not including what you've done in the past. So very much deserved.
Councilmember Kivel.
I'm actually pleased that we're able to rectify this problem. I think that the process that got us here was really a cheap shot and completely inappropriate. And I hope that you understand that we don't feel the same way that you had been kind of abused in that interview, or your evaluation. We're solidly in your corner, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Do we have a motion?
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yep.
Is this going to be retroactive to the January 1st date?
It was not my intent when I wrote the agenda note to make it retroactive. There may be some legal issues involved there, but I would leave that to the city attorney. Since I recommended an increase greater than that directed by the city manager who's on leave, the additional increase would more than make up for the 30 or so day lag. But that's up to council.
Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comment on this is the one that bothered me a little bit, is I don't want to get in the business of approving raises for city employees. That's what you're here for. That's what you get paid to do as the interim city manager. You have a lot of freedom to run the city as you see fit, and I don't want to get involved or get near any employment issues with city employees that I don't feel I have any jurisdiction as a city council member to partake in. I think you clearly have the authority to do what you want to do. If you feel that these individuals, and both of them tonight are stellar employees, they have fabulous work ethics, that's not the issue. The issue is whether I am the proper person to bring this motion to. Second of all, I have not seen the underlying reviews for these particular employees. I have no idea what went on. I don't have any background. I do not have privy to their personnel evaluations, and nor do I want to see them. That's not my role. That's not my function. And so I am going to wash my hands of this, and I'm not going to vote for it. Not because I don't think they deserve it. I think you can go ahead and do what you want to do. I don't disagree with it. I just don't think I'm the person to be approving it.
Mr. Mayor, comment?
Chief, please.
The charter does give the city manager the authority to set compensation for employees. There is a phrase in there that says within budget. Those two positions are not currently budgeted at the specific amounts that I am recommending, although with respect to Mr. Donahue, the range is certainly there. There could be a budget amendment required for one or both of these. It's not a significant amount, or it's not a large amount, But that's the reason that I'm seeking council's guidance, that it's not already budgeted as mandated in the charter.
Well, then it's not before us properly anyway, because now you've provided new information that's not here in the motion. Are you going to have to amend the budget to accommodate for these raises?
Well, there's a good chance we won't have to amend the budget because we've gone so long without a couple of positions that overall on wage and salary line items will probably still be under.
Thank you, Chief.
Can I ask a question of
Yes.
Mr. Wilhelm? Typically, this seems to me like an HR issue. Is that something that council would normally get involved in?
Well, there isn't a dedicated HR person in the city. So this would typically fall under, as Chief points out, this would normally fall within the purview of the city manager's discretion under the charter. I think it was brought in part, as Chief says, because of the budget issues, but I think it's also because of the interim aspect of his position. I think he's simply trying to make sure that he has some authority to do what he's doing, or at least the council's understanding and approves of what he's doing. But I do think the city manager normally has the discretion and control over setting salaries and pay.
Well, I don't know if I would agree with that, only because there's been, a fire chief has been hired and city council never approved that. There was a salary given, city council didn't approve that. We have a new employee tonight, council didn't approve that. That was all done by the city manager. Those hiring, and you have another person you're going to be hiring. You don't need city council's approval to give the raise. I mean, that's your decision. If it means anything, I don't have a problem.
With respect to the utility and public works superintendent, the salary that was negotiated with him was within the existing budget amount. And that's the issue I'm having problems with. And the city attorney is correct. It would be a lot more comfortable decision for an actual city manager to make versus the interim manager. So I'm looking for council's guidance here.
I think you're looking for cover.
I'm in favor for it, so I'll make the motion to authorize the interim city manager to increase the rate of pay for the DDA and Economic Development Director Donahue, Bob Donahue, to $69,564 effective February 14th, 2018.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
New business number 5, salary increase for city bookkeeper. Explanation of this one's rather lengthy, but I'll give it a shot. City bookkeeper Lori Mosier has been employed with the City of South Lyon for the past 25 years. While serving in that position, she has performed functions above and beyond those normally falling within the job description of bookkeeper. 2 additional major areas of responsibility include benefits coordination and human resources administration. It should be noted that the city bookkeeper is a non-union salaried position. Mr. Douglas Borer, partner at Plant Moran, PLLC, was consulted regarding the bookkeeper position and appropriate compensation. Mr. Borer advised that a more appropriate job title would be controller or assistant or deputy finance director, and that current compensation appears to be below market average. The interim city manager discussed compensation levels with Mr. Borer, and he concurred that a 3% raise would move the salary for the city bookkeeper into a more appropriate range. That current salary for the city bookkeeper is $60,594. A 3% adjustment would equate to a $1,818 raise, the salary level to $62,412. This adjustment is recommended for the above-mentioned reasons, as well as the fact that the bookkeeper will have additional responsibilities in the preparation of the city budget. Possible courses of action: approve, do not approve the recommended salary increase.
Chief, is this going to be beginning on the February 14th date as well?
Yes, it would, which is the first day of the next pay period.
I'd like to get a little information on what is the typical process. Is there an annual evaluation? Is there an annual or some time of time-stamped sequence of events that take place to review what the wage structure is and make amendments to it accordingly?
I'm not aware of that being done. I'm not aware that there is a regular, if any, annual employee evaluation of the non-union people.
So everything is ad hoc?
I can say at the police department we do have annual evaluations of personnel, although they're subject to collective bargaining agreements.
Right. Well, the reason I'm asking is that the City Hall has a number of people that are non-union employees, and I know that they all work very hard to try to make the city run smoothly. The idea of people being kind of cherry-picked to be represented with an embellishment of their wage without some kind of a structured mechanism to guide this whole thing. I don't want it to end up being a popularity contest or something of that nature. People should have the ability to, if for no other reason, to appeal to their superior for being able to get a raise on some kind of a structured, time-stamped environment, I guess. I'd like to see us move in a process that's a little bit more structured than simply someone recognizes that someone has been doing more than what their job description had been, so let's embellish their wage. I imagine that all the gals at the front counter could end up taking some kudos for things that aren't necessarily in their job description, that they're more than happy to step forward and attend to when a customer comes in. So,
and some of those are subject to collective bargaining agreements and not at the discretion of.
Correct, and there's some
manager.
that aren't, and that's where this kind of goes south.
And some are not, and the reason and the difference and the reason for the recommendation with respect to the bookkeeper is that in the absence of the city manager and under the structure of the current budget document preparation, we're going to be putting yet another significant function on the city bookkeeper in addition to her accounting duties, her human resources duties, and her benefits coordination duties.
My comments have nothing to do with Lori and her performance. This is simply the structure that this is being conducted in.
I understand
I don't want
that
anyone misunderstanding that.
At some point, what I would actually recommend is a study of the jobs and the functions at City Hall to analyze workload, and then have a wage and salary study done that would set appropriate levels for all of the non-union, both full-time and part-time positions at City Hall. Mm-hmm. But that's something that's some number of months down the road, mm-hmm. and probably will be the responsibility of a new permanent manager.
Well, I had intended to kind of speak to this at council comments, but we're in the process of we've lost one employee in there already. We're in the process of losing another one. She's filling out her last 2 weeks, I believe it is, because other communities were financially rewarding them for what they were going to bring to the party. I don't want to see that continue on. I mean, we've lost some really valuable people, and I'd like to find some way that at least they can be heartened by the fact that there's a process where they can at least state their case and get some review on whether their wage is appropriate. So that's all I had.
Mary?
I'm a little confused with how this is working. So in terms of Lori's position in the agenda note is stating that she's going to have additional responsibilities in preparation of the city budget. And we're giving her a raise for that, the 3% adjustment, which is fine. But then the next agenda note, there's a proposal to have a consultant come in and provide budget preparation assistance and oversight to bookkeeper Lori Mosier and interim city manager for somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000. So I guess my confusion lies with if Lori is doing the bookkeeping and handling the budget, then we're going to hire an additional consultant to come in, an outside third party, for this additional potentially $15,000. That's, to me, fiscally irresponsible. If we're going to give the raise, let's give the raise. Let's have you do the job. I'm sure you'll do a spectacular job. But I don't see the point in having both. I have faith in Lori to do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off.
Yes, actually, the proposals and the consultants we spoke with both had proposals whereby it would cost from $13,000 and change to $15,000 for them to do the total budget job. Under the scenario that we are recommending, we would bring in Plant Moran under option 1, which would be an hourly as needed basis. And by doing that, we truly believe that we can cut the cost about in half, not go the $13,000 and change, not go the $15,000 that the other consultant would have asked, but that we hope to contain the cost down into the $7,000 range.
So I did read that in the agenda note. I saw that as well. However, that still doesn't change the overall issue is if we're giving a 3% raise to our bookkeeper, I don't see why it's necessary to have a third-party consultant come in and pay them $7,000 when we're giving this additional raise for the work that she's doing. So for me, it's city funds that are going in two different places for the same thing. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but the total is still going to be far less than if we brought in a consultant and had them do the whole project and didn't put any additional work on the city bookkeeper.
Go ahead. Chief, the folks from Plant Moran also bring a different level of expertise to this party beyond what Lori brings. She's going to do a lot of the footwork, a lot of the pick and shovel work, okay? And they're going to provide the review of it from a CPA standpoint when preparing that budget. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, and I don't mean to steal Mr. Kamler's thunder because he will be speaking to these issues, but certainly their expertise is far beyond that of any city manager or any bookkeeper.
So again, it's just not that Lori could just do the job soup to nuts.
And the additional element that they will be adding is they will be the ones that will come to council at council workshops and at public presentations explaining the process and the final budget document.
Mr. Mayor. So just out of curiosity, is our original city manager coming back in time to work on the budget? Do we know that? Do we have that information?
I have no information whatsoever as to the status of the city manager.
Because to me, that would say that we're having a city manager, an interim city manager, a bookkeeper, and a consultant all working on a budget. All these funds are going toward the budget, which the budget is important. It's not in the dire straits that I think some people make it out to be, but I just don't think that we should be throwing all these funds toward that when we could be putting it in different areas. We could be focusing on other things. Not that we don't need this, it's important. I just don't want us to utilize too many of our resources on one thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to assert the same issues that I had with respect to the first raises. I don't think that this is an appropriate item for me to be approving. I think you have full authority to decide whether or not you're going to give him somebody a raise. You're the assistant city manager. That's the first issue. Second one, I had a question. Are you changing the job title of Lori Mosier?
No, it was not my intention at this point to
Okay,
change the job
because
title.
No offense to Lori, she's a great employee. She does not have the credentials to be a controller. I looked at credentials today for a controller.
I understand that. And the reason that those terms were suggested by Mr. Boer was to allow us to look for comparable pay in other municipalities, but then
Okay.
we had huge problems trying to find comparables that had the same job descriptions or similar job descriptions and similar populations and other statistics as the city of South Lyon.
Next, I just wanted to say that I think that for anyone to give someone a raise and not have a basis to judge or to hold that individual accountable for why you're giving the raise that you're giving, to me, just beckons back to the days where you sat around a coffee table or you sat in the local watering hole and decided who got what. I mean, no offense, but there's nothing professional about what we're doing tonight at all. Absolutely nothing. This is just give somebody a raise. I'm not saying they don't deserve it. I'm not interested in what they're getting. It's the process in which they are getting the raise. There is nothing there except give them a raise. And that, I think, is unprofessional, and it takes the city back just whatever. Next, the other comment that I wanted to make with respect to individuals that may be moving on to other jobs, get used to it, because you obviously don't understand the economy that you potentially are living in. The Atlanta Fed has issued a report, and I still have not gotten through it, where they actually are estimating that first quarter potentially could be 5%. I already know people that I have a stack of employment agreements that I'm reviewing of people that are moving and changing jobs. That is the way it's going to be in this economy. So I'm not going to sit here and hold anybody back. If you have an opportunity to get out there and increase the value that you bring home every day to your family, go ahead and do it. But we'll give you a fair raise. We'll give you good benefits, but I'm not going to sit here and feel guilty because individuals are taking advantage of a good labor market. You'd be crazy not to be taking advantage of this labor market. And I'm sure not going to hold anybody back. So this is just the way it's going to be. Get used to it. It could be an interesting ride this year. But for those employees that are talented and gifted, we may find out that more will be on the move. But that's what happens when you get in an economy that is chugging. And we won't know the extent of it until probably second or third quarter. But it's starting to move. So that's my comment on that. But I'm not going to vote for this either.
I'd like to just make one comment. Everybody that's in business knows it costs way less to keep an employee than it does to end up switching employees over and over again. So.
Point of information. Chief, when was the last time that Lori received a raise?
I believe it would have been last July.
And what did she receive?
I wasn't in City Hall at the time, but I believe it would have been 3%.
And I think that's what was approved by the city council that was in her position at the time, right?
Or clerical it was, yeah.
In the budget. Well, you can't give one without giving the other one, so.
What was that now?
You can't give one without doing it for the other. You gave one to Bob. I don't see how you can hold Lori back.
I'll make the motion that we direct the city bookkeeper to make the adjustment for the position, raising it to salary level of $62,412 as recommended.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'm going to support that.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Lise, can we get a roll call on that?
Kibble,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Parisian,
Aye.
Walton,
Yes.
Fritzweiler,
No.
Richards,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to new business, number 6, budget preparation consultant.
Mr. Mayor, we've already discussed a good part of that. The agenda note and supporting documents address 3 different consultants that were interviewed. Mr. James Vitrino Consulting, Plant Moran, and former Assistant Superintendent for Finance from Southline Community Schools, Jim Graham. After all things considered and a review of the documents, it is a recommendation of administration that we go with the option 1 presented by Plant Moran. The main reason being they are familiar with our systems, with our budget, and with our personnel already. We believe that we could most cost effectively get a new and viable budget in place with their assistance. We do have Mr. Brian Kamler from Plant Moran here in the audience to answer council's questions.
Is Mr. Graham or Vitriano agreed to show up at city council meeting, discuss their position on this?
They would come if invited. Certainly Mr. Vitrano would. I'm not certain as to Mr. Graham, and I do know Mr. Graham had some extended vacation time scheduled.
To the point that it could compromise our ability to put a budget together?
It could impact it, but the involvement that he was willing to extend to us was much more limited than the offers from, or proposals from either Plant Moran or Vitrano Consulting.
His cost point was significantly more attractive as well, so.
I may be able to offer just a little bit of
Yeah, I agree
information
with
on that. I don't want to speak for Mr. Graham, but I have spoken to him. And I took away from our conversation that he was more interested in helping the city organize a 3 to 5 year plan based on he was at the time still going to be a consultant coming back for Southline Community Schools, and like Chief said, he does have a little bit of vacation time going on. So it's my understanding that he was looking at something to help us out a little bit more in that direction.
Which is actually all that we're asking for right now. I mean, ultimately, whether the city manager comes back or we end up moving to a different kingpin here, they're going to be the ones that are responsible for the budget from that point forward. So we just need a stopgap for where we are right this moment. That's, I guess, where I'm kind of scratching my head why we wouldn't capitalize on a guy that's proven himself at the school district for as long as he has. Why it hadn't been, maybe you took it quite seriously, I don't know. There really wasn't much reflected in here except for the fact that he was $50 an hour, and these guys, I mean, we all know Plant Moran is steeped in our budget. They're quite familiar with everything that we've got going on and know how, actually, they probably have a much better understanding of what our future needs are and where we should try to focus our, direct our focus to things that might have been kind of overlooked in the past. But as I said, this is a stopgap circumstance, so we don't need someone that can build a Cadillac when we're trying to just get through to the next step. That's my 2 cents worth. I mean, I don't, and it's, this isn't any kind of again, this isn't a compliment or a comment on Plant Moran, you particularly, or anything like that. This is simply that we found ourselves in Dutch with trying to fulfill our obligation with getting the budget together. And to have you guys do a whole cloth budget for us when Lori's capable of ended up doing an awful lot of the footwork, and I'm thinking with Mr. Graham's ability and understanding of how the budgets work, he's familiar enough with our operation, he should be able to kind of glean quickly where we need assistance. So, all right, I've said my 2 cents worth. Please fill us in on why you guys are the value we need.
Well, so thank you very much for the opportunity to come speak with you. Just to give, I know Glenn for probably close to 20 years, yep. But for the rest of you that are newer to council, I was on your audit team from 1999 till approximately 2013 or so. So I have got quite a history with the city and with Lori. Since I left your audit team, I changed departments at Plant Moran, and so instead of being an auditor, I now lead the group known as Plant Moran Government Accounting Professionals. And what we do is city-side accounting, being the Lori in quite a few different places. 17 staff working in about 25 to 30 municipalities across Michigan. So we're going to do 10 to 15 different municipal budgets this year. For cities smaller than you and for cities significantly larger. Now, to your point, you have Lori already, and I will tell you she is excellent, and I have every faith that she can handle 99.9% of this on her own, and my role and the role of my team can be merely that of a sounding board. The occasional phone call or email response, or come to your session and facilitate some discussions. Or you could approve it and I do nothing. By voting for the proposal that is before you, it doesn't incur you any cost. Mm-hmm. We're really just, as of council, to be used as the city sees fit. The other option was to just give us the ball and let us run with it, and we'll do the entire thing, which would be fine as well, but like you said, you don't need that. So I'm sure Mr. Graham with his background would be fine. I'm sure the other gentleman with his background would be fine. I'm not going to say that I'm better or worse than either of them. I'm just telling you this is what I do, and I'm more than happy to help you. And again, it's my level of involvement is at the city's discretion, so it could be 0 or it could be up to what that max was, however you want to use us. I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Mr. Kinney.
Just a couple of things that I see, a potential advantage with the Plant Moran approach is, look at the tentative schedule that we've laid out, that one of the individuals has proposed here, and you look at the individual steps that are involved and things that need to be accomplished, and basically we're 6 weeks behind schedule right now if we started January 1st. All right, so that means that this individual working by himself can make up that elapsed time, or we have the advantage that somebody has a little bit larger organization that could provide additional resources should that become necessary to put us back on schedule. Again, I wasn't on the council last year, but I think a lot of the people here remember what it was like last year when the budget was prepared. Remember the 11th hour changes. Remember the negotiations back and forth on what they thought the budget should be, how much the revenue was going to be, and the rest of it. And right now, if we look at that schedule, are we already behind schedule?
Based on your charter and based on what the state requirements are, I don't think that you're behind schedule. Really, for most of my clients, we're really just getting into the heat of budget season. I believe that your charter requires that you have to adopt the budget by the last meeting in May. Mm-hmm. That's plenty of time to go from what Lori's already done, to go through whatever review process we work out, to get you a draft and hold whatever workshops, number of workshops that you want to have to discuss it, run revisions through and come back in time with a final proposed budget and in time to have your public hearings. I don't see any reason why that's not very attainable.
So I just want to clarify, if we do decide to go with your proposal, then we're all authorizing our interim city manager to utilize you whenever we need you. So it wouldn't be a council decision, it would be solely your decision, correct, Chief?
Right, if council approves utilization of Plant Moran, I, in consultation with Lori, would work on the budget documents that we have, the spreadsheets that we have, and when we encounter something that we think is beyond our area of expertise, or where we think we would need some guidance, we would call either Brian or one of the lesser expensive people within his group, because there are tiers, and we'd go to the appropriate level for the help that we needed at a given time.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Also, have we done this before? Have we ever had anyone professional come in and guide us?
Not to my knowledge. The last two city managers, I believe, just handled the budget. I don't know if they went to an outside consultant, but I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
The last three, actually. I mean, Cook was...
He did it himself.
Well, I was referring to the two city managers prior to the current city manager.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a real advocate at this time for taking a look at the services of Plant Moran. I'm not saying that the city has to do this for the next 5 years, but I've been studying this budget for the 2 years that I've been on city council, and in my opinion, it's a mess. There are many issues. I have a book here that is filled with issues regarding the budget, and I would like to sit down with someone professionally that has the expertise in this field for not only putting a budget together, but analyzing data, which is some of the issues on the enterprise funds. I asked for certain information last year and never received it. And it's quite critical if you are looking at funding, how you are going to fund your repairs with respect to water and sewer if your tap-in fees are on a decline. Well, I don't even know if anyone in the city even thought about that issue. And so these are the kinds of issues that it's not just putting a budget together, it's getting in and looking at rate structure, it's getting in and looking at water usage rates in there. It's looking at the enterprise funds and how we build up some of those funds in order to get the sufficient funds in there for taking care of water and sewer. So it's not a simpleton kind of thing. So I don't want you to think I'm looking at it from a simple kind of, oh, you just throw a budget together because that's what we've been doing for the past, whatever years. There are some serious systemic problems with this budget. When I sat on this council and in 2016 spring brought it to council's attention that they weren't even charging the correct rate that they were permitted on a mill to service the debt of the bond for sewer and water, that was a red flag that told me nobody knew what they were doing. So you can sit here and tell me people have been doing this for years and years. How you can miss that millage rate when that was a critical function of servicing debt, which is an elementary part of a budget. Your revenue, your expenditures, and do you have the money to service your debt? I couldn't believe it. So I have spent the past couple of years now digging into the budget, and we have no planning document. So we don't have a document that takes us into 3 years or 5 years. That doesn't exist because this city doesn't plan like that. A lot of cities have their budgets planned for 3 and 5 years. We don't have that. We just skirt around and live from budget to budget, year to year. I looked at a budget that was prepared for next year that was handed to me. That was a deficit spending budget. That's what was handed to me. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. I'm not going to sit here and lay blame on anybody right now. I am only here to solve the problem. I would like to have the opportunity to work with a professional that has the credentials in budgeting, has the credentials in city planning, and just spend a couple of months with a professional and see if that doesn't make the difference. Because what all I'm hearing tonight is let's do the same thing that we've been doing for the past 10 years, and let's all think that we're going to get a different result. Unless you understand the problems you have in your budget, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to get the same result. The only thing that's going to change is you might get a budget on time. But budgeting is more about getting it on time. It is how are you budgeting for the city's future. That's not in this budget. So I am going to make a very strong argument that we need your services, if anything, to get through, to work with someone that has the experience like you have. You work with other municipalities. You may see how other cities are solving some of these problems that we have. I would like to sit down for a couple hours with you and give you my notes and see if you can't work with the team here and work through these issues. So I am definitely in favor of you coming on board. My question is he only doing a budget, or are we going to get a 3-year plan out of this?
It will be part of both.
Okay, I'll ask the question again. Are we getting a budget, or are we, in addition to the budget, getting a 3-year plan?
I'll let Mr. Kamler speak to that.
I work at the discretion of the city, so whatever I'm directed to do is what I'll do. But you raised some very valid points, and the accounting nerd in me, self-professed, loves to discuss those things, whether it's theoretical or practical, and I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with you and get your thoughts on it.
Well, these aren't theoretical. These aren't theoretical. I mean, I can show you the budget, I can show you the numbers. I don't recall ever seeing a 3-year plan for the city, how the city is going to plan for 3 years from now. I mean, they sit here and we have a vision of where we want the city to go, but there's no plan to articulate that vision because we're too busy living from year to year on a budget. Well, that's what most cities do that are successful in implementing their vision plans. They plan in their budget how they're going to fund that vision 3 to 5 years. That's not being done in the city at all.
Okay.
So I'm going to argue for a 3-year plan to be included with the budget assistance this year.
Does anyone have anything else?
Actually, I just wanted to ask, did you speak with Mr. Borer about our last, when you guys came out and did a field trip for us and kind of walked us through the last budget?
I have not had any discussions with Doug about your previous budget, no.
Well, the point of my question was they made it pretty clear that the doom and gloom and all the fear-mongering that had been taking place was unnecessary, that we're not in anywhere near the straits that, that are being portrayed. So, and I don't disagree that I like the idea of the 3-year budget aspect too, and if we're going to use you guys, it seems like we should at least try to carve out something that whoever is going to take the reins once this budget is completed, they have an architecture to be able to work, and they can point out things that they have misgivings with. I mean, nothing is written in stone, but it gives you a forum to actually argue against a different, or argue for a different process if you want to overtly make a change. So, but I think the idea of trying to structure something that is more long-term and living makes a lot more sense than simply just getting us through the gap.
Councilmember Kennedy?
Yeah, I think that just to reiterate what Councilman Kivel has said and Council Member Kurtzwell has as well, I think the timing is right on this with the new DPW and Water and Wastewater Department Superintendent. I mean, it just piggybacks off some of the discussions we had over in that department as far as looking at, 5-year asset replacement plans and how that factors into the long-term budget, so that you're You're looking down the road. You know exactly what it's going to cost. You have some idea as to what it's going to cost in the next second, third, fourth year. And you're dialing that in every year a little bit sharper. So it isn't just all of a sudden this year, yeah, we have all these things that need to be replaced. I mean, they didn't just happen. You knew about them, but just didn't plan for them. So I think it sets the stage to do something like that and do it effectively.
I'll ask a question.
Councilman Richards?
If we were to approve going with your proposal or the city manager's proposal to hire Platt Moran, are we talking about a 4-month contract or a 6-month contract? Because that would include the budget time and a couple of months afterwards, okay, where we have to turn things into the state. I didn't think in any of this that we're talking about hiring you for a yearly contract at any time. And you gave a ceiling that you wanted to keep it at, okay, within a range, okay. I think that's a good idea. No question, we need help, okay. But I don't think we've stated anywhere in this idea that we're just if we get you, we're talking about 4 or 6 months, okay, not the whole fiscal 2018 or the rest of 2018. That's lacking as far as I see in any of this. Well, personally, I think we can get. I know we got terrific problems, but I think we can. And we haven't got a right structure. The structure's all scattered right now. Okay, plus we got other problems besides. But I don't think we need you guys for more than 6 months, or Graham or Vitriano. Okay, longer than that period of time. Personally, I think we could get by with James Graham much cheaper, and he could fine tune us. The school's budget is 10 times what our GPN or our annual budget is, and he's been running it for 20 years. Okay, nothing against you, you know.
No offense taken, sir.
I look at saving money. Okay, we're losing money. Okay, we need to have somebody help us save more money. But I think it should be noted that whatever we're going to do is going to be for 4 to 6 months and not just an open-ended contract. That's all I have.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Willem?
I would just point out, if the council is inclined to go with Plant Moran, I haven't done a review of the professional services agreement addendum, but I did notice in paragraph 13 of that document, there's a provision where the city would indemnify the contractor for Plant Moran, and that would be something that I would recommend against. That should be removed. And we could certainly work through that issue as needed.
Brian, I was curious, are you, out of the 3 categories, are you a financial specialist, senior manager, or partner?
I am a partner.
Okay. Can we have Maggie talk to somebody else?
I can assign whoever you like to the assignment.
I think they can convey the message at the very least. Is anyone hard and fast in a particular bent here?
Postpone it or what?
Mr. Mayor, I would at least, I'm not opposed to this at all, but I would at least like our city attorney to review the document before we do anything. So let's not be so hasty. Maybe postpone it to the next meeting. Is that doable?
No.
Or not?
You may think that you can get this done. Cities that I know, they are on their second reads of their budgets already. And I think you probably have experience with cities who...
There are some that start 9 months ahead of time. There are some that do not.
Yeah.
And I can work in either environment.
Well, given that we are in some uncharted territory here, I think a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and move that we authorize the interim city manager to execute the proposed consulting agreement with Plant Moran for budget consulting services contingent upon review of Plant Moran's agreement and acceptance, final acceptance by city council. I almost think you need to start tomorrow.
This is the indemnification discussion that
Yeah, but it's contingent upon Tim reviewing the contract. So if you need to work out your contract, go ahead and do that. But my personal opinion is we need you hitting the ground tomorrow.
Do you get that?
I'd like to second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming.
Motion passes. New business number 7, sealed bid award, variable frequency drive project, high service pumps 3 and 4 water treatment plant.
Up until this morning, that would have been totally on me.
I was going to say, are you read in, Mike?
I literally have a right-hand man here who has a lot of knowledge on VFDs, and unless he ran out of time and left us, Ron Beeson, who's been involved with this project from the very start, is available and can also speak to it.
Point of information. Ron, I believe that you and I have talked about this particular job. This is a budgeted item that's in conjunction with the painting of the water tower. It's a requirement that we need to install this equipment in order to maintain pressure once the water tower is taken offline and painted. I think it's a part of that, besides the fact that the instrumentation actually prolongs the life of the equipment at the water plant that it's going to be installed on and so forth. And, we have a budgeted item right now for that water tower project. This was going to be part of that.
It is, yes.
Okay, and then subsequently in next year's budget, we'll
July
actually do
1st,
the painting.
We'll look at the painting in that budget year.
Okay.
Mike Darga is also here from HRC. He was instrumental in this bidding process too, so.
Does anyone have anything else for Ron?
No.
Yeah, let me ask a question. It's not completely clear to me, I'm sure you know, pumps 3 and 4, are we talking about the well houses?
No, we're talking high service pumps. Those feed our water tower.
Well, then those are in the plant.
Those are in the plant.
They're in the plant, not the boxes outside where the well heads is.
Those are the wells, yep. Those are the well houses. These are 2 high service, 100 and 175 horsepower.
Okay, all right. It wasn't clear to me reading through this.
So that will establish the pressure throughout the city while the water tower is being painted.
We already have pumps, but they're not adequate. Is that what you're saying?
We do. Without the water tower, we would lose pressure throughout the city. We wouldn't have constant pressure. Right now, what we do is a constant speed, high service pump, feeds the water tower, fills the water tower, and it has a transducer, so it's based on level.
The pressure builds up in the bubble, and that goes down and
correct. That
maintains
that
an even flow of 64 pounds
a little less
square inch or something like that.
That is correct. So the VFDs will take the place of the water tower, and what those will do is they'll ramp up and down the speed of those pumps according to.
Yeah. Ron, if you don't mind, the speed of those pumps, and I don't know what they're set at, but let's say they're set at 1,000 gallons a minute. We might only need about half of that volume to maintain the pressure. And with those variable frequency drives, they operate at that 50% range, which is saving the city money in the fact that we're not running it at full speed. So you're going to save on your electric bill, and it's also going to save on your wasting water, because usually what you'll do is you'll set up 2 blow-off hydrants in your system, and it'll blow off water when it gets to a certain pressure because you won't have any pressure from your tower. I just experienced this down at the village of Parma. We did the same exact thing, put in variable speed drive pumps, controlled, and worked perfect during that time. So it's a pretty common thing in the industry to do this. It's 2 things. Number 1, you don't have to use as much water. You're not wasting water by pumping it out on the ground. And number 2, you're saving on electrical costs because it runs at a more efficient rate.
Is this on-time software that keeps the pressure?
It's based on the pressure. You set the pressure for 50 pounds, and or the various fluids. It'll maintain that 50 at a certain rate, and then if it drops in pressure, then it'll ramp up the speed of it.
Okay, we've got all three-phase going into that facility, okay, for that whole complex. I don't know, what if, I've seen it go down, because I've lived over there, you know, accidental, and then there's 3 generators. 2 will kick in and 1 is saved for reserve. That's how they alternate, okay? What if we have an accident like that while we're doing this?
We've had that happen as well. You do a boil water advisory throughout the city, you get the system back up and running. You cannot protect yourself against every particular failure and ever. You're going to have the perfect storm hit once in a while. We dealt with that at the village of Port Austin. We had that happen. We were running it with the tower down. They're serviced by a separate community's water system, and they basically lost their pumps, and our system went down. And we had to do a boil water advisory, get it back up and running for 2 days, and then we were back to normal. But there is a potential that can happen. Those are things you have to worry about. You take precautions against those, but again, nothing's foolproof.
Well, with 2 pumps, we're basically making sure we're protected then, I guess is what you're
Yep.
saying.
Yep.
Okay.
Is that redundancy or is it a necessity for?
There's redundancy. That's what the redundancy is for. And in this case, it was another system. You got to remember, if those pumps are running 24 hours a day in this situation because your tower's down, if you lose power or you lose a blip at any moment, you're going to lose pressure in the system, which creates a boil water advisory.
If we had a fire
situation
in the city,
yep,
where we have a high demand,
Yeah, right.
we would
Right.
need that backup.
Sure. Well,
yeah, you need the backup, and then we would probably have to run it in hand almost just to maintain with the fire flow.
this is as Mr. Kennedy had suggested. This is one part of a whole volume of things that have to take place for the water tower. So I'd like to make a motion that we award the variable frequency drive project to DF Best Company for $54,500 as specified and authorized construction engineering costs for HRC not to exceed $54,50.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
New business number 8, roof repair on 464 South Lafayette. That is the city's rental property.
I'll start that, Mr. Mayor.
Chief.
Council had previously requested bids. They had not been obtained prior to my tenure as interim manager. I directed the DPW foreman to go ahead and get those bids. They are before council, as well as some very simple cost-benefit analysis and repair and maintenance estimates for that property, so council can not only make a decision on whether they want to repair the house roof and or the garage roof, but whether it is cost-effective to remain in the rental business. The information is there, and the decision, of course, is totally up to council.
I'll make a motion. Unless you want to start discussing it first.
Discussion. I think.
I'd like to discuss it.
Councilmember Kennedy?
I think, as the chief has just mentioned, I mean, the real crux of the discussion here is, are we in the landlord-tenant business? Okay. This particular house, they want $9,000 to replace the roof, and that presupposes that the wood underneath is sound and the roof can be placed over it after the tear off. Okay, if the wood is not in that kind of condition, it's going to require that be replaced, and that could run anywhere from $100 to $1,000, $1,500, depends on how much plywood needs to go in there. In addition, we still have an electrical repair over at that site that needs to be completed. I think one of the service legs going to the garage has been disconnected, eaten through by a rodent or whatever. It's about $1,000 repair on top of that. I've looked at other rental properties within the city. We charge, it's a very low price for this property. We're making very minimal money on it. The question is, do we want to continue to support this and throw $9,000 or more in maintaining it, or get out of the rental business and look at putting that money into something that we need also in the city, perhaps repairing the roof at the police station? So, no, I'm not inclined to support this, okay? I think it's money down the drain. I think we need to get out of the rental business. And I think there's better uses for the taxpayers' money than servicing this piece of property. Right now, with the additional services that are provided for this house, we provide service, we cut the lawn. Granted, it's part of the park, we'd cut the lawn anyhow. We shovel the driveway. I'm guessing there's probably 11,600 other residents that would like the city to shovel their driveway. Okay, we provide it, and then we give them a discount on the rental. We need to be out of the rental business. That's my opinion.
I think we need to determine what we're doing with this property, kind of piggybacking off of Councilman Kennedy. If we're going to use it for a joint complex, if we're going to touch base with Parks and Rec, which we should because it's on their land, are we going to continue to use this as a rental? I think we first need to determine what are we using it for, and then make the determination whether we're going to put a new roof on it or whether we're going to use that $9,000 to demo it. So I'm not necessarily inclined to vote for this either just yet, just because I kind of want a little direction. Where are we going? What are we doing? What's the best benefit for the city?
Well, I'm exactly the contrary of those opinions. Firstly, as Steve had mentioned, the lawn mowing is going to be conducted irrespective of whether or not that house is there. We're not going to let it turn into a field of weeds. The idea of, I don't know, Ron, do you guys ever get back into that garage for storage? Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of having that driveway plowed to be able to access that isn't really a complete loss because we're just providing that guy access to the house. This is, so that's that 3525, the approximate cost for maintenance on there. I don't think that number is really a reflection of, because it's the house, it's simply that's the cost of mowing the lawn over there is the lion's share of that cost. This is a one-time occurrence that a roof will end up being good for 20 years. I'm hoping like crazy that Parks and Rec will end up being able to put a package together to try to raise the funding to be able to transition this in the redevelopment of what their vision has been that's been put together on the approved park plan, so that they can actually make that take place. In the meantime, this is going to be generating, I forgot what my figure had been, it was in the 3,000 range annually. So although we're going to incur a cost at this state, that hasn't been the case over the last, since we've owned it. Do you remember when that was that we ended up purchasing it from Nettles?
We signed a lease agreement in 2008 with them, May 16, 2008.
2000, oh, well, that's the rent.
Right.
Yeah, there was people renting prior to them, though. So, I mean, it's always generated revenue. So, we didn't buy it in 2008, did we?
We signed the lease agreement with the current renters in May 16, 2008.
Okay, that's the lease agreement. We bought it prior to that.
I don't have that date.
So it's been generating revenue ever since, okay, let's use the 2008 then. So, you know, we've got, 9 years of making three plus grand on that house being there. So.
No, that's not good. Can I go ahead? Yep. All right. I'd like to throw in some information on this. I've got to agree with Glenn on this, but I got a little different slant on this myself. I've been in that house, Mr. Daniels is a very good tenant in many respects, and he's about our age, I guess, upper middle age. He's never complained about anything or caused any problems at that location all the time he's been there. If he was going to move out, and he indicated to me he'd be interested in moving out in a year, I don't see why the city couldn't raise the rent a little bit, because I've been in that house. That house is beautiful on the inside, and a better place than I ever grew up in as far as attractiveness in many ways. It's a fabulous location, and it could be a sleeper asset for the city down the road in the future. Okay? Say, for instance, we wanted to have a guest, and a group of people visit the city here. We wanted to put them up for a time. If we didn't have a tenant, if it was vacant, we could offer it to them for a rented house, a motel or something. I mean, where they could come and we could put them up. That house is definitely worth a few bucks to put into it. And like I say, it's a hidden asset, a hidden sleeper. Sure, someday the property will maybe be a service center for the whole city, and that'd be great. But the idea of tearing the building down is appalling to me at this point in time, because we've got options. We got other options. We could raise the rent when Mr. Daniels moves out, and I think he's going to move out in a year. But I certainly back him all the way for having been a great tenant for the city, because what could have happened there with our ability, could have been a mess, and it's not been. It's been a very quiet place. That's all I got to say.
I actually pulled a copy of the lease agreement because I wanted to see what was in it, and when we signed it, what the monthly rate was. We have not increased that rate since 2008. I made copies for everybody. If you'd like a copy, I can pass it down.
Yeah,
It is just one page. So, go ahead, keep your copy. If you guys want to keep that for your own reference, but I personally think that if we are going to stay in the rental property business, we need to have this reviewed. We don't have a proper lease agreement.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Kennedy.
Looking at, and again, I haven't had the opportunity to be in the house. As Councilmember Richard says, it's in pretty good shape. Looking at it on Zillow, it shows it's about 1,200 square feet. And we're renting that thing. It's 3-bedroom, 1 bath. Is that right, Carl, to your recollection?
I never was in the bathroom, but it's a huge living room, a wonderful, beautiful kitchen, and terraced on the inside.
Okay, let me just get back to the point then. I mean, and we're renting this for how much per month right now? 800 something?
No, 900.
900. Okay. So you find something else, comparable in the city. Here's a house that's slightly larger. It's a couple hundred square foot bigger, so it's a 10 by 20 room. It's $1,700 a month. Okay. So if and I would agree with Council Member Walton that if we're going to be in the rental business, we sure as heck ought to be in the rental business and be compensated appropriately for what we're actually providing, because it's extremely undervalued.
When I did the same search, at $900 a month, you could rent a mobile home in the Lyon trailer park.
Southline Woods.
Southline Woods, thank you. I couldn't remember the name of it.
Well, I certainly don't have any misgivings with us reevaluating what that price point is. And I quite honestly look forward to that house being torn down. But I don't think that we should do it prior to giving up the fact that it generates revenue until we get enough funds to redevelop that to the parkland expectation that Parks and Rec has determined.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
So the question is, we ask the DPW to get bids for replacing the roof. Did we ask the DPW to get bids for repairing the roof? Did we ask them if there are interim repairs that could be made? Because right now I understand there's a leak in 1 bedroom, okay, and they put a tarp over that little portion of the house.
If I could, I did talk to Ron today at the DPW, and he emphasized that roof is beyond repair. It is at the point where it needs to be replaced as far as the shingles are concerned.
Sure.
Well, that's what this bid's for.
I think the question finally just comes down to is without really a whole lot of direction on what's going on with this property, how much money are we willing to put into it? Knowing in the condition that it's in, or at least on the lease we're on the amount of money that we're going to get back on it. It's tough to make that decision right now, at least for me. But that's just my feedback on the situation.
Mr. Mayor, I have a quick question. Does anybody know what Parks and Rec is planning on doing with it? What does the Parks Master Plan say? Because I think that would determine from there. I think we should at least reach out to Parks and Rec and see what their position is on this.
All we have to do is look at the Parks and Rec master plan. I mean, it's all
Did anyone do
in a
that?
document.
Does anybody know?
Just to add to that,
City Hall.
It is February,
It's true.
and I got to imagine there's a good amount of snow on that roof, and I can't imagine that leak is getting any better. So, I mean, we got to come up with a decision here. I'm not saying we need to do it tonight, but in good faith to this being a renter of the city, this needs to be taken care of. Doesn't matter how much money we're making off the property. They've probably got a small lake developing in one of the rooms. We all seen the snow that's out there. So I'm not saying it's urgent that it has to be forced through tonight by any means, but I just think that we've talked about this in the past. We've seen the numbers. We've got the bids.
How long is this bid good for?
I don't recall it. It may be in the bid document.
I didn't see anything that spoke to the timestamp on when it was good to.
I mean, typically when a proposal comes in like that, it's good for 30 days minimum. I mean, sometimes they'll extend it, just depends.
Right.
Well, these guys are local, so I'm sure they're going to give us whatever leeway we need, but. Well, we're never going to end up getting rich off this, but personally, I think that we should move forward and get this corrected and make the best of that circumstance, so.
Well, and just following up with you on that, Glenn, I mean, do we go with the lowest bid at that point and then just hope they don't have to replace?
Especially with the lowest bid being a local company,
yeah.
for heaven's sakes.
Well, there's two local
Those guys have actually helped us in a number of projects, and they're good guys, and they provided the lowest bid.
They also fixed the gazebo on, we're talking about McCarter. McCarter fixed the gazebo on, in our park already, so we already know the quality of their work. They're local. There are two other businesses that are in this packet as well, one of which is also local. But because McCarter is the lowest bidder and we're familiar with their work, I would be inclined to vote for them.
Well, I'm going to make a motion that we approve a contract with McCarter for $88.71 to replace the roof on the McCaddy Park home.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
All opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to our budget. I didn't know if Chief Kennedy wanted to get us started here on that, or if not, I will, Ms. Kurtzwell, please go ahead.
I have nothing at this point
Okay.
for budget.
The only thing I wanted to mention on the budget was, I saw in your weekly memo regarding the Safe Routes to School project had been canceled.
Yes, that was true at the time that I wrote it. As I'll be getting to in my manager's report, that project may be salvageable.
Okay,
One more bid cycle.
Is it salvageable at the dollar amount that we have budgeted for?
It looks like it will be salvageable at that amount or possibly lower depending on the rebid price.
Because that's what they're going to do. They're going to send out new bids.
That's the current plan. And that if we decide to go that route, we have a meeting coming up later in the week of all parties involved. Lyon Township, City of South Lyon, and South Lyon Community Schools. Our engineers will be there, and we will reevaluate our original decision to deobligate the funds and discontinue the project.
When do we have to let people know? I mean, when, there's grant funds associated with this, correct?
There are grant funds, and June 8th was a very critical date for a drawdown on some grant funds. If it didn't happen by then the municipalities and the school district could have been on the hook for the entire amount. What we'll be talking about later in the week is that the mere act of rebidding will cause the expenditure of funds, and that may then satisfy the time constraint.
By the drawdown?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're drawing down to pay for the rebid costs. That's the theory.
That is what representatives of MDOT suggested in my most recent telephone conversation with them.
So what happens if the bid comes back and it is now, instead of 77, it is now 85?
I think a more appropriate question, or certainly one that's easier to answer, is if the bid comes in within 10% of the engineering estimates, then the parties are still on the hook for spending the extra funds. And our portion could be, in fact, our portion probably is the lower portion of, or lower percentage of the three parties involved. I'm sorry I don't have a direct answer to your example, but we do have the option, if the bid comes in 10% or more or above the engineering estimates, then we can withdraw with no penalty.
Because this will have to be, when, do you know what the timetable is for having this number?
Well, I'll certainly know after the next meeting that we plan to have.
Okay, thank you.
Essentially, the 10% would obligate us to an additional $7,000, $8,000 if it came in at 10% above. So,
That's
I mean,
true.
our
It would obligate the other community, or it would obligate Lyon Township to a lot more because their percentage of the work is a lot higher.
I thought that 77,709 was our activity that we were.
That is specifically for the work that would take place within the city of South
Correct.
Lyon.
So, I mean, we're only exposed to $8,000 additional dollars if the bids came in poorly.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's so much more work being done in Lyon Township that they would pay the lion's share of the overage.
I mean, with the grants and the benefit rates and that, we're still end up, you know, we'd spend a lot more if we were doing this on our own, so.
Anyone else have anything on the budget? All right, we'll move forward to the manager's report.
And Mr. Donahue stole most of my thunder on this item because I was going to address participating in the meeting regarding the 5 problem properties within the city. And in fact, a sixth, that being the southwest corner of Lake and Lafayette Street and the continual storage of vehicles there. That was another topic of conversation at that meeting. But the most immediate progress was made with 110 Detroit Street. We already have a meeting scheduled, I believe, later this week with the property owner, and we're hoping for some progress with that address first. And the other item that I was going to mention was that I participated in that conference call with representatives from Safe Routes to Schools and MDOT, and we are trying to put the Safe Routes to Schools project back together if there's a way to do so without significantly putting City of South Lyon funds in jeopardy. and that's why I have to go to the next meeting to find that out. Also, council might be interested to know that the snow emergency declaration went pretty well. DPW was able to very rapidly clean most of the city streets. They did an excellent job. In fact, I made a trip out to the DPW yard personally this morning to thank them, and much to their delight, drop off a dozen donuts too. So
You didn't do that at wastewater.
Those DPW guys do most of the plowing. And where I was going with that is because of the snow emergency declaration, the police department did their thing to help out the snow plow truck drivers to get the streets clear to vehicles. We wound up having to write, and we don't like having to write any tickets to our residents. We wound up having to write 47 tickets to people that didn't get the message that you really need to get your cars off the street so that these plow trucks, for everybody's benefit, can get the streets cleared as quickly as possible.
Just as a point of information.
Yep. Hang on. Hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's okay. Councilmember Kurtzwell, go ahead.
I just had a quick question on SLERA. I don't know if all of council is aware that there may be an exit of them. And from what I heard, a parent told me that they may be out of the building by spring or early summer.
I've not received any official notice from, and SLERA, for the viewing audience may not know, is the South Lyon Area Recreation Authority. I have heard similar stories that they may have succeeded in negotiations for the old Duncan site on Griswold Road. I don't know if that's factual or not. At any rate, I have heard that, but I do not have official notice that they are going to vacate the old library building on Lake Street. But looking for a silver lining always, if that takes place. And I believe Councilmember Richards mentioned looking for a place for cultural arts. That might be a very good match for the city and for cultural arts, to have both programs and displays.
Well, that's kind of where this was going, was maybe we should tie down when they are going to be exiting, so that can get on the table for council to consider. That would be a great place for culture arts to have their own freestanding building. It has parking lot in the back. They can, I'm sure there are plenty of volunteers in the community that would help put that building together for their use. But, I mean, that's down the road. You know, I don't speak for them, but I'm just saying it would be nice to have a culture arts building in the city. That'd be wonderful. I mean, but I do think that council probably should be informed that that building is going to be vacant, and Bob Donahue should probably be aware of it. I mean, he may have a potential person who might be interested, and council will want to look at selling it. So,
as I say, I haven't received official notice, but I will take the initiative and see if I can pin them down on what their plans are. And I will also check the lease to see what their obligations are for notice prior to vacating the building.
My understanding is that it might be sooner rather than later. So, thank you.
Oh, you're good? Okay. Does anyone else have anything?
I got something. Are you done with your, what you're going to go on, or?
My presentation is all set, and I'm more than happy to answer any question that I might be able to address.
Okay, I got a large question here. At least I view it as large. This whole thing about safe routes to school is a political train wreck, okay? We committed to fund a matching fund of $150,000 from us to that, but we didn't have to put it all in at once. Only a portion, so much. Do you happen to know how much we actually have tied up in this safe routes, like an escrow right now?
I don't believe we have any funds in escrow. What you might be referring to, and please understand that I've had little to no involvement in this project
I
up
understand
until the last
perfectly,
few
yeah.
weeks. But I do believe the city may have already expended some funds for purposes of signal improvement at Pontiac Trail and Marjorie Ann, and that obligation may already be taken care of.
Yeah.
So what we would have, the remaining obligation would be the $77,000 and changes our portion for city projects on the Safe Routes to School project that.
Okay, we put that money up, Glenn, I think it was 4 years ago, something like that. And it went forward slowly, and then it stalled completely. Okay, and it's been like that for the last 2 years. Glad we got the streetlights in, but so.
That would be a traffic signal.
Okay, this traffic signal, yeah, I know what you're saying. So we're on the hook to pay the rest of this money, $77,000, or can we back out of the deal? Okay.
We are still completely free to deobligate the grant funds and walk away from the project. And that's the purpose of the meeting that I have planned later in the week with our engineers, Lyon Township's engineers, as well as Mr. Dolan from the township and Superintendent Baker from the South Lyon Community Schools.
Okay, great. I hope you can report back to us. I'd like to know what it all happens. Really.
Well, I will keep you posted via either personal reports or the weekly reports that you will continue to receive.
I want to thank you. Your reports are the best thing I've ever seen in a long time. Okay, because I've always got packages before being elected to council, and I've read them thoroughly. But this is wonderful. I appreciate your efforts on this. I think all of us do. We all agree.
Certainly. Does anyone else have anything for Chief Collins? Manager's report? Okay, with that, we'll move on to council comments. Tonight, let's start with Councilmember Kennedy.
Well, I just over the past couple of weeks since the last council meeting, I have had the opportunity to spend a considerable amount of time talking to the city's employees and touring the city's operations. Ron endured me for about 6 hours out there at the water and wastewater treatment plants, and about the same amount of time over at the DPW yard. And took the tour of the police station, the fire department. They put me in the front seat of the police car. Talked to the ordinance officer and spent a fair amount of time with, the folks in the administration offices as well. What I found is the city is very fortunate to have some extremely knowledgeable, experienced, and dedicated individuals focused on providing the services that the residents have come to know and expect. I found several examples of asset care best practices where equipment is closely monitored in order to schedule repairs and minimize risk of failure to the city. Sometimes this included coordinating with other cities so the mobile equipment could be taken out of service for needed repair while having access to backup equipment from the other municipalities should it be needed. I observed crews whose work was scheduled the previous day so they could quickly and efficiently begin their daily shifts at the start of the shift by not having to wait for job assignments. And finally, I saw numerous examples where the workers had designed and built equipment for use in the city rather than purchasing it, thereby saving the city significant amounts of money. Many of these folks work behind the scenes in the city and often don't get the recognition that they truly deserve. So I would encourage all of the city's residents to acknowledge the efforts of these folks when they see them. A wave of the hand to the officer on patrol or the snowplow driver, or a friendly word, email, or phone call to the city department recognizing someone's efforts. It would go a long way to letting these folks know that we appreciate their efforts. Finally, I would encourage those members of the City Council who haven't visited the city's various departments to do so in order to better understand and appreciate the challenges they face as a department and in turn we're going to face as a city. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Richards?
Well, I don't know, I'll keep it short. I'm very thankful for the the services that we have that you've been providing, the ambulance and the fire and police department in this extreme weather condition. I know you've had a lot of calls and people are scared, just plain scared when they see snow that deep. You know, I'm thankful that we've got such a fine service personnel in this town that can take care of and handle things. That's all I have today.
Thank you, Carl. Councilmember Walton.
Well, I have just a few short things. First, I want to thank all the public who came out tonight and spoke. I think it takes a great deal of courage for anybody to speak publicly, whether you're up here at this table or you're walking up to that podium. So certainly want to thank you for that, and I hope that we actually do take some of the advice that's been given tonight and get a little bit of extra training. There's always teachable moments. I always like to learn new things. I want to thank the DPW. They have done a great job with the snow. Want to congratulate Martin's Hardware on their 50-year anniversary. So it's wonderful that we have a business here in South Lyon that's thrived for 50 years. Want to make sure everybody knows that Mary's Dairy Twist is now open and that they have a new warm chocolate chip cookie sundae. And let me tell you, it's great. So go get that on these cold days. You'll warm up real quick. Good Day Cafe had lunch there. Very busy, excellent place. So get out and enjoy the city, even though we are snow covered. DPW has done a great job with it, so you can still get around. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kurtzwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, very briefly would just like to thank the individuals that came out tonight and spoke on behalf of Joyce Closey. Your voices were heard by me. I join with you. And I hope that your voices were heard by those who needed to listen and change. The comment I found tonight that was most interesting and tearing at my heartstrings was the gentleman, Mr. Duty, who spoke of understanding discrimination. I think it's important for people to hear how discrimination affects other individuals, and I found that your comments were extremely timely. They were very moving, and I want to thank you for sharing a part of, unfortunately, a part of your life that I'm sure was not pleasant. It was probably painful, but you came up to the microphone with strength and courage, and hopefully you've motivated us to move forward with change. I'd also like to thank Joyce for the work that she is doing, and no doubt this is hard for her, but she's taken the step, and in her own way, even though she's not on council, at least not at this time, she is moving the city forward with very, very positive change, and I think for that she needs to be incredibly commended for the step that she is taking. You know, you never know why these situations come to you, but all I can say is in terms of my encouragement to you, Joyce, is that sometimes we are put in a position in life because that's where we're supposed to be at that time. So obviously you are supposed to be here with us at this time in your life, and I'm going to take advantage of everything that I can learn from you and from your lawyer. Additionally, I'd like to say tomorrow's Fat Tuesday, and it's Punchki Day. And there's no other place in town to go for punchkis except for the South Lyon Bakery. I am sure that they are there now getting ready. That's the only place that I've learned that you can get absolutely fresh punchkis. There will be a line outside that door. My favorites, of course, are the Bavarian cream and blueberries, as if I didn't need anything more to eat. So for Fat Tuesday, please stop by the South Lyon Bakery. They're just fabulous. Wednesday starts Ash Wednesday, and I always kind of like to stop at Lake Street Tavern on Ash Wednesday, only because they have probably the best French onion soup that I think I have ever had. And so stop in, have some French onion soup on a cold winter day with a salad, and then head off to your services in the evening. Now on Thursday, yes, once again, I'm eating at the South Lyon Hotel. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the South Lyon Hotel has a new menu only on the first Thursday of the month. It is their Polish dinner tour. It includes pierogies, it includes cabbage rolls, and mashed potatoes and sauerkraut and kielbasa. And they had it last Thursday. They started serving at 6, and they were sold out under an hour. Could not believe that they sold out that fast. So obviously the South Lyon Hotel has hit on a fabulous menu that is selling out well. On Friday, once again, I'm eating again, and yes, I am going to be going to St. Joe's for the fish fry. St. Joe's Fish Fry is probably one of the largest fish fries in the area. They will be serving between 500 and 600 individuals during the Lent season. And if you're going to go to the fish fry, you'll see a lot of people there. You do not have to be a member of the parish. You will see many, 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 many people in the community in attendance at that fish fry. It starts at 4. The line starts at around 3 o'clock or 3:30. And when you're done, please stop down at the Lyon Theater and top off your weekend with a fabulous, fabulous movie. So there really is no reason for you to go anywhere but downtown South Lyon. There are plenty of places to eat. You can enjoy this season that we're having right now. And I say, put your boots on and travel downtown South Lyon and put a couple pounds on, and you can walk it off while you're walking around. So that's it for night. And I'd like to say, what a great place that we live, and good night to everyone. Thank you for inviting all of us into your homes this evening. Have a great start to the Lenten season, and we will see you at the next meeting of the City of South Lyon. So thank you, and have a good week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Member Parisian?
I would like to first start off by saying that Parks and Rec has a vacancy, and they're looking to fill that vacancy. So if you have any desire whatsoever to contribute to our parks in any way, shape, or form, they are a phenomenal commission. They are very professional. They're very affable. When you attend their meetings, they're just an excellent group. So I would highly recommend, if anyone knows of anyone too, spread the word. Also, I would like to thank DPW, police, and fire. With the amount of snow that we've had, you guys have been doing an excellent job. Thank you very much. And lastly, I wanted to express my condolences to the family of Tanner Bryan. Tanner was a young man who had deep roots in the city of South Lyon, and his loss was felt throughout South Lyon High, and most likely South Lyon East as well. So my thoughts and my prayers are with you. Thank you, and have a good night.
Thanks, Mary. Councilmember Kibble.
I'd like to extend my thanks to Marilyn Smith for decades of operating the resale shop downtown, for being a member of the DDA, and for her interest and involvement in helping to improve the downtown and the city in general. She was always willing to throw her 2 cents worth in there and let you know how she felt about things, and I always appreciate that kind of an attitude. It doesn't have to just be like these surface kind of discussions. We can have conversations that are a little deeper than that. So, and she was always willing to partake in that. I'm looking forward to, my last I heard was KV Sports is planning on relocating there. So I'm hoping that that all works out well, and that'll be something that'll generate some nice foot traffic downtown. So that'll be helpful. I would also like to provide thanks for their service and the well wishes to the futures of Joan Ciarelli and Megan Blaha. Both ladies are from City Hall, and they're leaving us for opportunities, and I wish them all the best. I'd also like to extend my personal thanks, as well as just City Council thanks, as everybody else here has, for all our DPW and actually all of our employees. Everybody has stepped up to the plate under compromised circumstances, and everyone's performed very, very well. So we can all be proud of what the city brings to this, to what the city's machine brings to our community. So thanks again. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. I'm going to echo some of that too, as far as Joan Ciarelli and Megan Blaha. What a joy to be able to work with those two, and there's no doubt they'll both be very successful in their future endeavors. So thank you for your commitment to this city, and just working very hard here every day that you were here. So thank you, and best of luck. Again, echoing a lot of people, our council members, DPW, just just killed it this weekend. That was a disaster out there. And thank you to the citizens that made sure they got their cars off the road. I mean, I can't imagine how much easier that makes it for people. You're putting in 12-hour shifts trying to navigate these roads. So thank you to all those guys and girls out there at the DPW. To my friends in the second grade over at Brummer, we've been having a hard time. I was supposed to speak to you guys on Friday. I was supposed to speak to you yesterday, but we didn't have school. So hopefully I will see you all tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to that very much. In a final note to Ms. Colosi in her representation, I would like to say that I stand by my statements from the January 22nd meeting and would encourage you to take a look at that. So on that note, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.